Hello, Eric.
Hello, Josh.
You seem tired.
No, I'm wide awake. This is my peak hours.
Cool.
It's actually noon right now, and I'm still really tired.
The last time we recorded, we did the same thing. And we recorded at like 1 in the afternoon, and that's when we just woke up.
Except for I was like awoken much earlier today than we were that day.
By like an hour.
So I'm going to be more incoherent than I was previously, which is saying something.
So we're doing a different thing today. We're going to do some of our favorite albums because we thought it would be a good actual introduction instead of our 2018 list.
Just a good way of rounding up what our favorite
like
kind
influences
of
and things are too.
Yeah.
So, would you like to start or would you like me to?
You start.
Okay. So, I think we each picked 5 to talk about and we had 1 overlap. So, let's just start there. And that overlap was, drumroll, Talk Talk. Oh, you're still going. Talk Talk, Laughing Stock.
Yes.
Which I really love that album a lot.
So, okay. That album is like one of the weirder first wave post-rock albums. And first wave post-rock is one of the more interesting genres, I feel like. Because post-rock nowadays is more just like the same kind of crescendo core kind of music.
I agree.
And they're all explosion in the sky type ripoffs. But in the early days, post-rock was just really bizarre and unique. And every first wave post-rock album sounds nothing alike.
Like that versus like Swans.
It's like Soundtracks or Spiderland or anything like that. They all sound like completely different albums. And then like second wave you get like Godspeed and then everything kind of starts to sound like them and then like a simplified version of them.
I don't even know it's like post-rock now. I just think of like...
It's not really a thriving genre right now, I would say. But yeah, Talk Talk is a really, really weird band because they started off like just like a normal 80s synth pop band. They have that hit song, It's My Life.
I absolutely love that song.
It's a great song, but most people know that song by the Gwen Stefani version.
Yeah.
Or the
No Doubt.
I don't know. I couldn't remember. But yeah. So I know that there's a story that he showed, I think it was this album or it was Spirit of Eden, where he showed this album to his record executives and they were just like, what? And had like no idea how to react to it.
I was gonna say, I thought he was a lot more involved with like, I could be completely wrong. I thought he was involved with the recording and stuff more. Do you know?
Yeah, I think so. I know he's done recording for other bands too.
That's what I thought.
He did recording with one of the bands I'm about to choose, but
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I think there's only like 6 or 7 tracks on here, but like I would say 3 of them are among like my favorite songs ever. How would you summarize this album in like one word? Is there one word you use?
Like moody or sparse, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. I always thought this album was really good, and then Merman kind of grew on me significantly, and it kind of changed how I viewed the entire album, because I think that song does like so much with so little.
Yeah. And
then everything else kind of like, I started to realize the place of every instrument and every song. And I guess like songs like After the Flood and Newgrass and
Ascension Day.
Especially Ascension Day started to grow on me like a lot.
Those are like my 3 favorites.
Yeah. And I started to realize how unique of rock songs they were, and just songs in general.
Right.
So, I mean, it's definitely a very unique album, even for like today.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
I think if I had to pick a word, I'm between 2. I would either say bittersweet, because all of the melodies are like incredibly sad, but all of the like guitar and stuff is like kind of like uplifting more. That makes sense. I especially think of like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just a very odd like combination of emotions that I feel when I listen to it.
It's sort of a hollow sounding album at times.
I disagree. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Not like throughout the whole thing, like obviously which is the one that's like has like a pretty normal song and then it kind of cuts to that really weird and long like noise pattern, I guess.
After the Flood.
Is that okay? It's After the Flood. Yeah, like that song's pretty like,
that's very straightforward. Like, okay, so that brings me to my other like descriptor, as I was gonna say balanced.
Yeah.
Because I think there's like a really unique, kind of like a really unique middle ground that they find between like the really dense parts of the album and the really stripped down parts of the album, and the way they blend them together is like absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Specifically on After the Flood is like always the one I think of first. But I'm always like amazed that I feel like the instrumentation is kind of minimal in a lot of spots.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
But like you still get weird enough things, like there's like an organ in there, and I don't remember which song. I think it's an After the Flood. There's like really like sporadic claves that are really loud in one ear. Like if you're using headphones, it's very strange. But
that's what I said earlier. Like Merman kind of made me. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Merman.
Okay, like that kind of made me realize how much of like I appreciated this album, because I feel like that song especially you can really kind of key in on what instruments are playing in the background, and then you kind of start noticing them throughout the rest of the album. You kind of realize how more like full the songs actually are than they sounded initially.
Yeah.
And,
you know what? Oh, sorry.
I don't know. I was just gonna say it's not like, I wouldn't say it's an uplifting listen. I think bittersweet is definitely the best word for it.
I'm not saying it's an uplifting listen. I'm saying that the instrumentation is a very like it is very interestingly contrasted with the vocals, because I think the vocals are so, everything about the vocals sounds like he's struggling to like, is that Mark Hollis? Yeah. Is like struggling to like get his lyrics out and stuff, and it just sounds like he's like in tears when he's trying to sing.
Yeah, it's not a happy listen.
But then like the instruments just feel very like together and very like subtle. There was another thing I was gonna say and I just forgot what it was. This is really gonna bother me. Talk for a second.
I mean,
talk for a second, Eric.
Yeah, joke. Anyway, so I would say that the instrumentation, if it had like a more like,
oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say if it had a more like run of the mill or just kind of like average vocalist, I feel like it could be a pretty like mellow and soothing listen.
Yeah, I agree.
Which it can be at times, but for the most part, I think the sadness of his voice, for lack of a less corny phrase, like kind of grabs you more. But what were you gonna say?
I was also gonna talk about the instrumentation. There's just like a really unique subtlety, and they're able to have like really emotional, like a real like emotional hit in very small details. Like I think of the chorus on After the Flood, because the whole song is pretty like straightforward, and then it like changes keys at the chorus, and it's just immediately way more emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Newgrass. The guitar's kind of like I wouldn't say twangy, but it's more of like an almost a country vibe.
A little bit.
And then you get to like the I guess it's more of like a refrain, and it's just like 3 piano chords.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like 3 descending chords, and every time I get really sad, and I can't explain it. But it's just really fascinating to listen to me. So
I mean, out of the post-rock, first wave post-rock albums, I would say this is like one of the more accessible ones. Like I would definitely say this is an easier listen than like Spiderland or Soundtracks or something like that. But there are definitely really weird and harsh moments on it that like kind of make it interesting. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's like a weird experimental album throughout, but it kind of,
when it does do it, it does it like
it does
really
it extremely
smart.
well, and like it blends into the album really well. It's just a really great album too. It's doesn't sound at all how old it is. I think it's
1990.
Is it 90?
It's early. It's late 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
I think it's 1990.
I think it actually is 1990. But yeah,
because I think Spirit of Eden was like 88. I want to say.
It's definitely, which is also. I mean,
also,
we could almost have
we could just do a talk
the exact same conversation that we had for this album about Spirit of Eden too.
Yeah,
but
I just Laughingstock is like slightly.
Yeah, I would say this album's more important, and it does what Spirit of Eden tries to do a lot better at certain points.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it's probably one of the better albums of the '90s in general.
Yeah,
if not one of the better albums. Period. It's real good.
Yeah,
it's real good.
You go ahead and take your pick. I'll let you. I just did one. So
okay, I'm gonna kind of take it from there. How I said earlier that Mark Hollis worked with another band I was going to talk about.
Well, hold on, I'm trying to think of what this would be among your favorites. Is it okay? Go ahead.
It's the same genre.
Okay, I know what it is. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it's to stay in post-rock land for a minute. It's a band called Bark Psychosis, and they are They're actually the band that had the term post-rock coined, I think.
Okay,
Someone
that's
wrote a
interesting.
review on them, I guess, and then used the pretentious phrase post-rock for the first time to describe their sound. And I mean, they definitely fit that bill, but they're a bit like Talk Talk, but I think this band doesn't go for the bittersweet, like, hollow vibe as much as they try to go for, like, hey, let's try to make, like, the most pretty sounds we possibly can in different ways. I know, like, this isn't your favorite album, but the way you described it to me, I was going to mention, was it could basically land anywhere between, like, a 7 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10.
So I guess what was interesting is that I think I was the one who showed this album to you.
Yeah.
If I remember, and I told him, like, when I when I first heard it, that it's basically a 10, like almost a perfect album, but every song has one thing I hate about it that I'll just drop it slightly, and by the end I'm like, that was good but not amazing. So then you said you were going to talk about this, so I was like, I'm going to go back and listen, and it was way different than I remembered. The one thing I would say, though, is I feel like this is an album you have to listen to with headphones.
Yeah, I would say
I was driving and it just was not nearly the
Yeah.
like the effect that I
It's
was
much more, like,
able to recall.
if you have, like, a good sound system or good headphones, it's much more effectful that way. But it's one of those albums where, like, most of the songs kind of are similar outside of Fingerspit, which I'll talk about in a minute.
That's my least favorite.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites, actually. So I feel like that's, like, the make it or break it song for this album to, like, really get behind what they're trying to do. But every song, I think, has, like, one moment, normally towards the end, normally a crescendo, where, like, a certain instrument really just kind of flourishes and does something really amazing, and every song's a different instrument. Like, Absent Friend has, like, amazing guitar layering in the end. Then, like, Big Shot, which is a really weird song too, has, like, a glockenspiel at the end.
I don't remember that at all. But
It's like the best. I don't know what it's like, something to the extent of a glockenspiel,
Sure.
and it sounds just, like, amazing. Okay, talking about Fingerspit for a moment, it's, like, definitely, like, the worst mix song. This album's well mixed all around, but that song is just very jarring. It's way harsher and it's way more, like, avant-garde, I guess, than every other song on here. It's like the first half of that song is pretty, like, mellow and kind of, like, it keeps trying to crescendo, and every time it crescendos it, like, clips a bit. And then there's just a part where, like, the entire song is just, like, basically nonsense, with just, like, a piano, like, just kind of spazzing out.
Sure.
And nothing really making sense. And then it kind of quickly transitions from that into, like, probably my favorite part in the entire album, where it's just, like, a really beautiful piano part. And that just kind of sums up that whole album to me. And I don't know. It's the vocals, I think, are another kind of hit or miss part for this album. I know that you're not super into them.
That's probably my least favorite part of the album. This is my problem, is it sounds too much like somebody who doesn't know how to convey, like, emotion when they sing, so they just try to sound like they're shaking or something. And that always annoys me. Like, they try to put so much emotion behind their voice it's almost not believable.
There definitely is a lot of Mark Hollis influence, I feel like, in the way he's trying to sing. But I know that he worked on... I don't think he worked on this album, actually. He worked on the next one. I shouldn't have said that.
Which I don't think either of us has heard.
No, not yet. But I know it's mostly just as acclaimed. But I'm sure I won't like it as much as this one. But
that's fair.
And I also think Eyes and Smiles...
That's by far my favorite.
Yeah, okay. I think that song has really good vocals, too.
I agree.
And Pendulum Man is a really interesting closer. Yeah, that's probably the most, like...
Weird.
It is weird. It's a very, like... there's no vocals on it at all. And it's, like, kind of overstays its welcome kind of thing. But it's a really interesting closer to that album. Because you'd think with an album like that, it would close on something pretty epic and...
Sorry, it's kind of like an anticlimax.
Yeah, a little bit, but I've kind of grown to like it more than I initially did. It's a really interesting album. It's a very British-sounding album.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
It sounds a bit like Talk Talk, but I would say it's more, like, layered.
Would like, that be like your one descriptor word would be layered?
Yeah, it's very layered, and I know you're going to super disagree with me. I think I do prefer it to Laughingstock by a bit.
I think you have it rated.
Yeah, I do have it,
so
but
I don't care.
I think it's. I think it just kind of hits on certain spots that Laughingstock didn't quite for me.
Gotcha.
But I don't think this album is for everyone, I should say. It's
Nobody listened to this album.
No one at all listened to this. But I would say if you're into like post rock that goes for like that kind of Godspeed, like really, I keep using the word epic. It's a terrible word, but like kind of really full, layered, and really kind of beautiful sound. I think this is a pretty good album for you. Like if you aren't really into like, it's kind of like the antithesis to like, I don't know. I keep talking about Spiderland, but that would be what I would compare it to. Is like the opposite, I guess.
Sure.
It's a cool album.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend it to a lot of people.
It shouldn't be your first like post rock album.
Yeah, that would be really like a really hard first step.
Yeah.
So I think I will go ahead and I'm gonna do 2 and 1 here. I was kind of cheating, but they're very similar in a lot of ways. I did the first 2 Mars Volta albums, which is funny because that's one that you showed me, Mars Volta.
Mm-hmm. Like
and,
way back.
Yeah, this is a long time ago, and I hated them. Do you remember that? You used to play roulette dares to make me like angry. Do you remember that at all?
I don't think it was roulette, dude. I think you liked roulette dares. I thought it was at the drive-in. It was that.
Right, but I hated. No, so I really didn't like what sleepwalk capsules.
Yeah, that's off the drive-in album.
And then so you would like. This is a really stupid story. Sorry. You would like play. You'd like go on the Pandora and like play that, and then like skip to just like all the songs and try to annoy me. And
yeah,
be like But then like you showed me roulette dares, and I'm like it's not any better.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, cut to like a couple years later, and that's like one of my favorite albums ever.
It's kind of weird how they were in that because it was Pandora kind of sucks, but
Pandora's terrible. They always my big complaint. Side note, no matter what channel or what station you're on, they'll always take you back to like the same 4 bands.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I'll listen to like if it's like Black Sabbath radio, like within the first 5 songs I'll get like AC/DC, and I'm like, these are not similar at all.
I think that playlist is when I was really obsessed with Glassjaw, like in early high school. And I don't feel like they're very similar to the Mars Volta.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be.
I was just gonna mention like why was that keep.
Get your stuff together, Pandora. Actually, no. Everyone just use Spotify instead.
Yeah, are they even around still?
I don't know. My mom uses it, I think.
Okay, back to Mars.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I just did both of their first 2 albums, which are, like I said, 2 of my favorite albums. They're very different in the way that I don't know if you're familiar with like how they did their first 2 albums. Their first one was supposed to be way more like organic and kind of more, not necessarily like a jam band album, but a lot more room for like creative improvisation, I guess. Whereas Francis the Mute was like the lead singer, I think it was the lead singer, was like very meticulous with how he wanted everything done, and he like arranged the whole thing and like had it all laid out, and he didn't want like any deviation from the plan he had. Which I think is like 2 very different sides to a band that's already pretty strange. I guess I don't really know like where to start with them, because if you haven't heard them before, they're like, I don't even know what you'd call them. It's there's so many things.
They're just like I'd say like prog rock, most of all, kind of prog rock mixed with like post hardcore maybe.
But every time I hear them, the first thing I jump to is like the Latin jazz influence.
Yeah, there's tons of that. But I was just gonna ask, of the 2, which one do you prefer? Because it
literally changes on a daily basis.
I've had it switch pretty dramatically.
Interesting.
Because I
know which one you're gonna say.
Yeah, I used to prefer
D-Lows.
Yeah, D-Low. I couldn't think of what it was called. By a pretty big margin, I always thought Francis the Mute was kind of like overblown. And then recently, I've like Francis the Mute has grown on me a lot, and D-Low has just kind of not grown on me as much, or like ungrown on me, grown off of me, I guess. I feel like the mixing on D-Loust kind of does this thing where it never really peaks. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the first song off Francis the Mute is like one of the best songs, just period.
I agree.
And it like gets to like such a level that's like wasn't on D-Loust at all, I don't think. And it's just kind of so refreshing to hear that immediately after realizing that issue with Deloused. But I'd say Francis is the harder to get into of the two.
absolutely. Well, that's like my kind of my big issue here is that Deloused is like, it's probably like 10 tracks or so. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, there's like intro tracks and kind of like weird interludes and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But oh yeah, every song like kind of hits a lot of the same like highs, lows, kind of the same format.
Mm-hmm.
But every song is so distinct from every other song.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think that is kind of a product of being a little bit less meticulous with how they wanted to do things.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with like the first track on Francis, everything is so planned out. Okay, so the first track is everything about that song is like you can tell it was super super planned. Like especially with that weird kind of like bridge build up thing at like the halfway point. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where he like escalates, and then he like hits that one note.
Yeah.
It's so climactic.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but I think that's just like the real contrast there. As for like liking things on one versus the other, I do think that there's a lot of wasted space on Francis. That's my big issue,
yeah,
especially with the last track. I'm like, do you really have to be like 35 minutes long?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of that. There's a lot of that song that feels like wasted space to me. And then same thing with like the outro to the outro to the first track and the intro to Miranda feels like you could have probably done this in half the time. Like I don't think it needs to be that that stretched out. And I feel like there might even be the opposite problem on Deloused. Like they tried to cram too much content into like 10 tracks or whatever it is.
Yeah. I used to not be that hot on The Widow either. I know that song's kind of like a favorite for a lot of people.
I'm the opposite. I used to love that song and I like it less now. Just 'cause I've heard it so many times.
Yeah. And it's definitely the least like experience. It sounds like a song that almost be on Deloused, actually.
But I think the thing is it's definitely their most accessible.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is I think probably the appeal.
They're both really, really great albums. I mean,
it's just very different listens. Yeah. One thing I was gonna say is like my favorite songs. There's only really 5 songs I think on Francis technically.
I thought it was 4. I always see that their like albums are on different forms, or like there's like different setups of that album. I guess
there's definitely at least 5 because it's intro, Widow, Elvia. I don't know. Every time I hear that song, it gets better.
Yeah,
that song's really wild. Miranda, and then outro track.
So I don't remember there being an intro or outro track. Maybe the one I had just had them like combined with.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. What is there an intro track like
Cygnus?
That's the intro track?
Yeah, I'm talking about the first track.
Okay, yeah.
So there's at least 5 songs.
No, but I say that because like I've had that album before where there was like a different song at the beginning of the album.
I've never seen that.
I was wondering if there was like something weird. Maybe it was like a deluxe version or something.
I don't know.
But that'd be weird to put at the beginning.
Whereas, so like you really it's kind of like, oh, which song am I feeling today? It's like, you don't have that many. Deloused, I think I've had a different favorite song or favorite couple songs like every time I've heard it. And now I'm to the point where like, I don't know. The whole album I can just listen to straight through and I have no qualms whatsoever. I will say though that Roulette Dares and Drunk Ship both always kind of stick out. I don't know why.
Yeah, Roulette Dares is one of the better songs for sure.
I don't know. This really bothers me. This has nothing to do with the actual album. I saw it was like a Rolling Stone list of like the best guitar riffs, and Drunk Ship was on there.
That's really random.
I don't even know what riff they're referring to.
Well, what is the best Mars Volta guitar riff though?
I don't know. It's a good question.
It stinks that every album after this is like
not as interesting. Is
interesting.
that when they were on Fewer Drugs?
I don't know actually.
I think they kind of peaked during Deloused.
I know. Was it the next album? I can't remember the name of it. I believe it's like really long, and I think there's a lot of improvisation in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it doesn't like hit nearly as many like high points as like this album would or these 2 albums did actually.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about your next album?
Yeah, I'll talk about my double entendre of an album. I guess I don't know if that's really okay. Anyway,
okay. Whatever.
I'm not going to talk about one of them that long, but So I'm going to talk about my current favorite band, Can. I like the band Can quite a bit, actually. I've only heard them, I think, 2 years ago now, maybe 3. But
I think it was like 2.
yeah,
I can go to my Rate Your Music and see when I rated that album.
Yeah.
That was
Anyway,
our beginning.
I think Can. It's always been a band I've heard of. They're kind of like your favorite band's favorite band
Right.
kind of thing. I remember hearing Tom York talk about them a lot.
Is Radiohead your favorite band?
No,
I'm just kidding.
but they're your favorite band, listener,
Hey.
probably.
Oh.
But anyway, and I know the guy from Pavement, of all people, he played one of their albums every day, I think, for like a year or something.
I definitely
like
see
that.
the Can influence in every Pavement album.
Yeah, I don't, but
No, I'm just kidding.
I just think Can is just an extremely important and unique band. I heard Tagomago was the. I hope I'm pronouncing this
I have
right.
no half these. Yeah, whatever. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, the album with the face with the smoke thing. That's really cool. That was the first album I heard by them, and like, I think the first listen I was like, oh, this is really interesting and cool and awesome. And then Hallelujah came and I was like, what the heck? This is like the best rock song I've ever heard. And then Pecking O happened and I was like,
Huh?
scared? I don't know. And then I kind of realized that I'd never heard anything like this up until this point. Where I've heard things that were like genuinely weird and genuinely like structured and off the wall and like really well improvised, but I've never heard anything like that diverse in a single album up until that point. I think what you were saying with Mars Volta, where it's like he structured everything incredibly like purposefully, I guess. I feel like Can is like a band that can improvise so well that it almost sounds planned out. Hallelujah was like like 20 minutes long.
It's pretty long,
and it does not get boring for me like at all throughout. It's just like krautrock to a T, which I guess I haven't mentioned what krautrock is. I guess I think it's just, I don't know how it's really described, but I would just say it's like rock music that's more psychedelic and
from what I've gathered, it's
free form, I guess.
From what I've gathered, it's rock, but they try to pull out all the blues influence.
Yeah.
And then krautrock is like what's left over.
And it's like blues takes out the blues influence and puts in like something else. Like
I don't know.
Avant-garde.
Sure.
That's a common, I would say the more common themes with krautrock are like avant-garde themes, psychedelic themes, and mostly those two, but
sure.
It's just basically rock music that's more freeform, I would say. So Tagomago was like initially like one of my favorite albums for a long time, and then I got into another album I'm gonna mispronounce, the one with a can on it.
I'm not gonna try to pronounce it because
I'm going to. I think it's Egi Bamyasi. Is that?
Sure, we'll go with that.
Okay, that's the only time I'm gonna try to say that. That is the album that the man from Pavement listened to all the time.
Interesting.
Which I think it does. It's the same 7-song structure that Tagomago has, but I think it does everything better.
That's fair.
And it's also more accessible in a weird way, with songs like Vitamin C and I'm So Green.
Yeah, that's
which
probably
are like the two. Vitamin C is the coolest song on earth. It sounds like a weird, like, kind of James Bond type song, I guess.
Sure.
I think it probably comes from the influence of, like, their soundtrack days, I guess. But Pinch is kind of like the album's Hallelujah, I guess, but it's more psychedelic and it's a bit weirder. It's not as long, too. And Sing Swan Song, everyone's favorite Kanye sample. Kanye confirmed Can fan. It's one of the more atmospheric songs, I guess.
Okay.
Sort of. It's not as bizarre. I would say it's a more just kind of structured song. But then you get into Soup, which is the album's Pecking O or Augum, I guess. And it's way weirder, I would say, than Pecking O is. I think the first half of that song gets this pretty intense groove going, and then it just basically goes into, I don't know what's happening. It sounds like a buzzsaw, kind of. I'll just let you listen to it for yourself, but I guarantee it'll probably be the weirdest thing in music you've heard up until this point, at least in an album that's not trying in a half-fisted way to be weird.
You're not gonna mention the Earl confirmed Can.
Yeah,
song?
Earl also confirmed Can. I know Tyler, the Creator, actually, of all people, really likes Can. His first song on Flower Boy is a Can sample.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really interesting. I feel like most Can songs are in pretty common structures, like time signatures, for the most part.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
They
yeah.
seem to kind of hit the time, like a 4/4 time signature or whatever, but they seem to hit, like, emphasized beats in that at, like, really unique times.
Like syncopation or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. Like, I'm not super rhythmic, but
Sure.
I think they just... Because all of their rhythms to me are kind of what initially drew them to me. I just... There's not a lot of bands like Can. I'll say that much if you want to chime in on your Can opinion.
I can do that for you.
Nice.
I don't know what it is. Can is one of those bands where half the time I'll listen to their stuff and I'll be like, oh, I totally get it. This is incredible. And the other half the time I'm like, yeah, this is fine. Mm-hmm. It just kind of depends on like where I'm at and like what the circumstances are and stuff.
Is that for the same song or just in general?
Like I'll listen to the same song like in two different situations.
So
But
they're a
just-
situational band for you.
Kind of, but for whatever reason, like so since we both heard the album which cannot be pronounced, I have not returned to it. I don't know why. I don't think it's like I think it's great. I just never feel like listening to it.
I listened to it constantly. Not as much as Man on Pavement did. I think for about like a 2-month period, I definitely listened to that album because I was so fascinated by it.
Sure.
Maybe you had heard things at that time that were like kind of like were similar in tone, I guess.
Yeah.
But at that point, other than Tago Mago, I had never heard anything like that.
I guess that was my big thing when we both heard Tago Mago. You were like absolutely blown away, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool, but I don't think it's like radically different. It's just like interesting takes on things that I've kind of heard. But then the next time I came back to it, I'm like, oh, what am I talking about? This is not like anything I've heard before.
Yeah.
And then I came back again, and I'm like, no, I was right the first time.
Interesting.
So for whatever reason, I like everything I've heard of them. I've really liked, but I just haven't really had the desire to go back for whatever reason.
I don't want to talk about this for too long, but I should also mention in their kind of golden age period, there's also an album called Future Days, which I think you like more.
That was probably my favorite of the 5 or so
I
I've
can
heard by them.
definitely see why someone would have that as their favorite. I think it's just a little too mellow, I guess, for my taste, but
Okay.
it's definitely a really awesome album, and it's also, I've never heard anything like that either, so.
Moonshake's like among my favorite songs ever.
Oh yeah, that's a great
It's
song.
amazing.
Can is able to do some of the weirdest songs I've ever heard, some of the
like the
catchiest.
earwormiest.
Yeah, like Vitamin C or I'm So Green. And then they have like some of like the craziest jam session songs I've ever heard. I just love Can a lot. I could talk about Can for a long time. Damo, you're a great man. You know, he did stuff with what's the guitarist from Mars Volta?
Yes, I did know that.
I can't think of his name right now.
Omar.
Omar. Yeah, Omar Rodriguez Lopez.
Yeah.
They did stuff together.
I did
and that's
know that.
awesome because I didn't think of like how much. I feel like Mars Volta definitely listened to some Can back in their day.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking of, I'm not gonna get into that. Whatever.
Just phenomenal band. I didn't mention Spoon, which is also an amazing song. It's kind of like a weird thing where they have like an electronic drum set going on one side, and then he's kind of like doing a weird drum pattern, I guess, for
Sure.
like alongside it. It's really awesome. I think that was also a soundtrack to some German movie at the time. But yeah, if the idea of krautrock kind of is like interesting to you, I would say Tago Mago is as good a start as any, really.
I think it's fair.
Yeah. I'm kind of still on the surface level of krautrock, but maybe like Neu would be something else too.
Yeah.
Or Faust 4, but I don't as good of albums as I think those bands make, I don't think anything has reached what Can has reached for me at this
That's
point.
fair.
But yeah, so that's Can.
It's Eric's favorite band.
Can you believe how good they are?
Okay, I think I want to talk about my favorite drum album ever. I bet you didn't know that. Any guesses?
Is it jazz?
No.
Well,
Actually, I do have a jazz album that would probably be up there too.
Well, I definitely know what it is then, because it's Calculating Infinity.
Yes, it is. So, going back to Eric's Glassjaw days in early high school,
Woo.
I was getting into mathcore
I did too.
because I just, for whatever reason, I thought it was really fascinating because I liked really aggressive, like, that was also during my, like, Slipknot phase.
Was it a transition from Slipknot, or was it like the same time?
No, there was an overlap for sure.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So I think honestly what was happening was, like, I like the really raw aggression of what early Slipknot brings, and then I'm like, there's nothing interesting here.
Yeah.
So that was when I kind of discovered, like, Converge and other mathcore bands, Botch too.
Yeah.
But Calculating Infinity from the get-go, I was just, like, kind of fascinated by.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me, like, several dozen listens to kind of be able to dissect it, and there's still so much going on. I can't really like explain all my thoughts on it. For a long time I'd say this is my favorite album, like, ever. I don't know if that's the case now, but I don't have a good argument against it.
Yeah.
I'd say at the very least it's tied with a couple. If you haven't heard this album or you've heard their newer stuff, I would say go back and listen to this.
It's not super like their newer stuff.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Definitely took a direction change.
And that kind of goes to my point to why I like it so much, is having the original singer and the original drummer are, like, make all the difference to me. Mm-hmm. Specifically the drummer.
Yeah.
I play drums, so I'm, like, very kind of, I listen closely to a lot of percussion sections and stuff. And this album is so fascinating to me. I feel like I could just dissect the drum parts forever. There are a number of things that, I think it's Chris Penny, I think, is the drummer on this album. There are just a number of things that he does that I can't wrap my head around. Specifically, like, the outro to Weekend Sex Change has, like, one drum fill that I don't understand. And it sounds so good. I would say this is another one of those albums that's more about using structure in a smart way. Mm-hmm. Because there's, like, a really good balance of songs that have, like, one thing happen and then it just kind of goes way out into left field and never really comes back. Mm-hmm. And then there are also songs that have, like, one hook and it's very grounded, goes way somewhere else, and then comes back, like 43% Burnt, I would say, is one of those. And then Jim Fear is one where it just goes one place and then goes somewhere else and then goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then by the end, you're like, what?
Yeah.
But just every song to a degree, I think every song kind of hits the same, like musical ideas, mm-hmm. minus maybe, like, 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. But they all sound so different. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you were mentioning, because you play drums, I play guitar, and you were mentioning that the drum sections are really interesting to dissect. Like, guitar is probably just as, like,
I would imagine so. I'm not
there.
as...
Yeah. The vocals are really great. I almost think Greg could still work on an album like this pretty well.
Yeah, probably.
But I think definitely the drums, and I don't think his guitar playing never got this interesting again, in my opinion.
I agree.
And I'm sure the drumming isn't as great, but I don't know. This album it's pretty one note, like, tone, but it seems to do everything possible in that, like, kind of sphere, I guess. So it's not a monotonous listen or anything like that. Because I know a lot of, like, grindcore or really extreme kind of mathcore albums can seem pretty, like, this is more of the same, but
I think at the very least they seem really self-indulgent.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with, like, mathcore.
Which you could definitely, like, argue this album is a little self-indulgent, but I think the playing is just so good.
Yeah,
there's like a jazzy
musicality. Yeah, that's kind of my big thing, is that Chris Penny is, like, I hear a definite jazz influence, mm-hmm. Which is, I think, what separates it from maybe, like, Converge or someone.
Yeah.
Also, I think a little bit more raw production does mm-hmm. a lot of good for this album.
Yeah.
And then also compared to their newer stuff, it's way less melodic and way less polished in a lot of ways, which I think is what makes this more fascinating. But like I was saying before, it kind of hits a lot of the same notes, but then the songs that do diverge from what they're doing, mm-hmm. are so weird. Like, Weekend Sex Change is the weirdest song.
Yeah.
It does this thing where, like, it's kind of like Chris Penny kind of freaking out on drums while, like, who's the guitarist? Ben?
Yeah.
Ben, I think, is the guitarist.
Wait.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong there. I'm sorry. Hopefully, we'll put up his name.
I'm pretty sure it's Ben.
Yeah.
Just kind of does, like, a very simple, like, progression.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just cuts out and does, like, all these weird samples of, like, I don't know what it is. And there's this weird kind of hum in the background that just gets, like, louder and louder and louder until it's the only thing you hear.
Yeah.
And then it kind of stops. And then it's the same thing as the beginning. But instead of Chris Penny, like, freaking out, he's playing, like, a really cool syncopated, like, almost like a breakbeat thing. It's really bizarre. But that's where that feel comes in that just blows my mind. And then, like, Calculating Infinity, the title track, is, like, very simple, like, on the surface. But then, like, the more you listen to it, the more you realize what sort of intricacies there are and stuff. I don't know, just every time, it takes a very specific mood for me to get into this album.
Yeah.
But when I do get into it, it's the only thing I'll listen to.
I mean, it caught Mike Patton's ear.
Yeah.
So, and...
Which, that's also a really good...
Yeah.
Really good EP.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally is. I would just say they're just a very impressive band, even if, like, after this...
Sure, yeah, there's still a lot of songs I like afterwards, but
Yeah.
it never kind of captures the same, like, rawness or, like, in high, like, intensity peaks, I guess.
I would just say for a band that is this extreme, I would also say this about Converge, too, that it's really impressive that they've had as long and successful careers as they have.
Sure. I think Dillinger broke up, though, didn't they?
Dillinger
Okay.
did call it quits, and they ended on a reasonably high note, too.
Yeah,
so
from what I've gathered.
But yeah, very, very great album.
love this
very
album
great
so
band.
much.
It's good music here today.
Yeah.
Okay, for my next one, I almost didn't want to talk about this one at all because I feel like up until this point I'm like, what, like 3 rock albums or 4 rock albums?
I know you kind of wanted to do a little bit more variation.
Yeah,
so.
I did, but if I'm being completely honest with myself, I think this just has to be like one of my top 5 favorite albums, and I can't really argue against it. I would probably regret it later.
Give me a hint. I want to guess.
You think it's really good, but I don't think you love it.
Okay, that didn't help me at all.
It grew on you, as it did me, but it grew on me a lot
What's
more.
the genre?
Art punk? Is that a...
Oh, I know what this
It's
is.
a bunch of different stuff.
Is it? Let me guess. It's Velvet Underground.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not.
It's not.
Oh, art punk. I thought you said art rock. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's
I'm gonna
art
cut that.
punk is
I'm angry.
Art punk is like...
I don't know what this is then.
I feel like when I tell you, you're going to be like, eh.
Okay, go ahead.
It's Unwound.
Eh.
Leaves turn inside you, I think.
Yeah.
That's how you pronounce it. I always forget.
How would you
album names.
mispronounce the word leaves?
Well, no, I'm not mispronouncing,
Oh.
but like that might not be what the album's called. I'm pretty positive it is, but I'll make a fool of myself if it isn't on screen.
Is it
right
considered
now.
art punk?
It
Well,
well,
it's like post-hardcore.
it's like a lot of things. I think albums that are really resonate with me are albums that blend a lot of genres well and make it kind of sound like one cohesive thing, like Can, like Mars Volta, like other bands. But I think Unwound, yes, it's post-hardcore. I would say there's a lot of post-rock in this album too.
Sure.
On a post-rock
My favorite
kick,
song
I
on here
guess.
is like a post-rock song.
Oh yeah, definitely. Below the Salt is a very...
By far my favorite.
Terminus is a super post-rock song too.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know. This album initially I was like, wow, there's some really high highs here, but for the most part this is just like a kind of post-hardcore album that's trying to do a lot and kind of hitting and missing. Like the album starts out on possibly like the least like appealing note ever, where it's just like a ringing of like some, yeah, for like
It's literally like
so
it's
long.
so long.
It's like 2 minutes. And then after that, the song's kind of like just kind of mellow and like, okay, what is this? Where is this going, really? After some listening to it a lot, I think after a certain point, I started to realize what they were doing was, it wasn't just some things were hitting, but everything was hitting for me. Like even the things that I initially found incredibly off-putting, like Treachery, I initially thought was a really aggravating song to listen to. And then I started to be like, oh, the song's really weird and it has a cool outro, but it's still kind of annoying. now I'm just like, that song's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's one of those albums where like you start to figure more things about it the more you listen to it. And I think that'd be the case for a lot of people too. I don't think this would be just a me thing. It's definitely not an album you can unwrap first listen, I don't think.
You can't unwind it.
You can't unwound it. It's a bit of a longer album, but it does do so many different sounds and genres that it has a lot of variance to it as well. There's a song that's like, it sounds like a older movie, like a German movie. Radio Gra, I think is what it's called.
Oh, I don't remember. I barely remember that
It's
song.
just like kind of repeats this like weird old loop of a TV or movie, and then it just kind of starts playing out of it, and it's seamless and kind of amazing. And there's like the string sections on this album are just 10 out of 10. I don't know if they got some other people to play on it, but they're all amazing and enhance the album so much. December has like one of my favorite just guitar sections, and it's just the most plain thing ever, but it just is perfect for the song. And that's in the second half. Terminus is amazing, of course. First two songs are super catchy. Yeah, Below the Salt would be a song you'd probably want to mention. I don't, for as much as I love this album, I feel like Below the Salt should be like the song that makes me love it. It is probably not towards the top for me.
Interesting.
I think it's just, I think it's a really great song, but I think it's so like, you have to be in such a mood for it. That
I was gonna say, it's really long, and it really kind of only has like 2 sections to it.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of, it's like the Pendulum Man, I would say, of this album. They're very similar in kind of structure. Yeah, this album is really phenomenal. The second half of this album especially, I think it's just one amazing song after the other. I would probably recommend this album if you're into really any kind of like moody rock music, I would say.
That's fair.
I think it does that kind of like, because that's initially what I thought this album was, oh, this is a moody rock album that is trying to experiment. I think it does moody rock as like good as any band I've heard before. I know. And how are you with this album now? Because I know you've been in different places with it.
So initially I really liked it. Thought it was kind of long.
Mm-hmm.
And then like by the end I was like, no, I totally get it.
Uh-huh.
And that's another kind of Can situation where I'm like, I just don't really have like a desire to go back, but the songs I remember like really vividly.
Yeah.
Like Below the Salt, absolutely love that song. The intro track sticks out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the guitar on this album really stuck out to me for some reason.
Yeah, the guitar is great. It's not like super technical. It's definitely not Dillinger Escape Plan,
No.
but I think it does like really minimal sections, and it does it to the best of their ability, I guess.
Right.
Or like enhances the song as much as they can with just minimal guitar sections. Like there's not a ton of layering or anything. It's not like, it's not super post rock, but there's definitely some. This album just takes a lot of influence, and I think combines it in a really, really interesting way. I don't think there's a lot like this album either, that I could say. I don't think there's a ton of bands that really have tried to replicate the sound.
Sure.
But it's sort of, yeah, I guess it's like kind of like, it kind of reminds me of Velvet Underground at times. It's sort of like experimental, like post-hardcore that it's really good.
It's a really interesting album. I really should go back and probably check it out again.
Yeah, you should, idiot.
Sorry.
And listen to Can too. Just have a day where you listen to Can and unwound and be happy. I need to listen to more
Cans turn inside you.
Yeah, Cans.
We should probably listen to more Unwound because I'm really curious.
Yeah, I do.
Is that a band we've really dug into?
They're not. I should mention that as well. I have not heard much of them outside of this album. I've been it's like one of those situations where I've been like so enamored with this album that like I'm scared to go to their earlier stuff and be kind of disappointed or something like that. I know they have a lot of stuff that's pretty interesting. I think they used to be a lot heavier actually, which is cool. All right, so what do you want to wrap up your list with?
I have 2 left.
Oh, you have 2 left.
Yeah, are you done?
No, I have one more after this.
Oh, okay.
So
technically you started though, so I mean
that's true. So I guess I'm stupid.
I guess just to kind of break up our rock list, I did a jazz album that I really love.
Yeah.
This is kind of in that same vein of albums have to be in a really specific mood to like, and that is Eric Dolphy, Out to Lunch, which I know we've both heard.
Yeah.
That I think is absolutely incredible, and you think is really good.
Yeah, I think it's really good.
I guess if I had to choose like one descriptor for this album, it'd probably be angular.
Yeah.
'Cause everything about this album is kind of hard to listen to,
Yeah.
but it combines like three of my favorite things. I really love like avant-garde jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I really love like just things that like are really hard to get into because I feel like those are the most rewarding things.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of hate jazz that's like overly swing centered. And I feel like I'm sorry, actually, like there's a fourth thing. I really love the sound of either marimba or glockenspiel in jazz songs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. It's just a weird thing I have, but it combines like all of those things and it sounds spectacular. It's only I think like 5 or 6 tracks. I want to say it's pretty.
I thought it was like 4.
Is it? Well, let's find out here. You
While
talk
you're doing that, I will mention. I really wish I had a jazz up on here. There's a lot of jazz that I really like, which I'll mention later. But I think this album also. You said angular. I think
It's 5 songs.
Angular, I should say. This album also is really moody too. I think there's kind of like a weird escapism I have with this album.
Okay.
Where it's really easy to like listen to this album and kind of like be like, oh, it's taking
Like,
me to this place.
sure.
It's a very interesting. I imagine on psychedelics this album would be very weird.
Oh, I would imagine so as well.
As would a lot of these albums, I'm sure, but that one in particular. And yeah, the playing I don't feel like is necessarily super technical or anything. Maybe it is, but it seems like a pretty minimal album where it's just it's doing something simple in a really unique way. I feel like.
Going back to like drumming too, this album is really fascinating. Do you know who drummed in this album?
Is it Roach?
No.
Oh,
Tony Williams.
Okay.
Guess how old he was?
17.
He had just turned 18 when this
Wow.
album was recorded, which is nuts.
I know with a lot of early jazz, there's
yeah.
a lot of young playing.
I
on it.
think Eric Dolphy died really, really, really young too. I could be mistaken, but I think he was
dead now.
I don't even think he was 30. Like he might have been 30, but he was very young.
When did this album come out? Like
60.
Okay, it was in the 60s.
64.
64. I can't do that.
This album hits a lot of really unique like notes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, apart from like musically, like just a lot, it's very varied. The intro song is really funny because it sounds like it's just gonna be kind of like a conventional like quirky jazz song,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get like 30 seconds in, and it's just like it's just all these weird horns and stuff. And I remember initially, like, I put this album on, I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then that happened, I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And then I, like, changed it, and then I came back and I loved it. I can't remember the name of the second song. I think it's Something Sweet. I could be mistaken. But that song is just unbelievably sad, and I can't explain why. This whole album kind of does this thing where it'll be, like, kind of what Calculating does, where it'll be, like, one hook, and then it'll just go do something completely different, and then it'll just return, and then the song ends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing with the song that's, like, probably my favorite, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's, like, Gazzolani, or Gazzoloni.
Yeah, I think, I mean...
It does that thing where, like, the hook on the song is so bizarre, because I don't know that much about melody, but the way that the hook is phrased, it sounds like somebody's asking me a question, and I can't. It's such a bizarre feeling. But then that kind of goes off like way somewhere else, and then it returns. Then it kind of ends. I can't remember I think it's Straight Up and Down is the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, Straight Up and Down has the weirdest like hook to it, and it does this thing where it starts off like music from like a screwball comedy from like the 60s. And then it takes the second half of the hook takes the weirdest turn. And I think that's kind of the thing that like is fascinating about this album to me, is that it'll take like one idea and just take it somewhere completely I didn't expect, which I think is really fascinating.
It's a super unique jazz album.
Yeah.
So.
And like I said, it'll kind of do this thing where like everyone will kind of go and do their own thing, but then like one part of the band will just completely ground the song.
Right.
And a lot of times I feel like it's either the bass or the marimba, or I don't know, whatever types of things he's playing. But it's just a very odd like conglomeration of ideas to kind of work together.
Yeah.
Which I think is really fascinating. I know you heard this album. What do you think?
I really like this album a lot. It's not an album, like, I guess what you were saying with Can and all that. It's not an album I return to very much at all.
Sure.
As is the case with a lot of jazz, with exceptions. This album's just like, it kind of has like a Ornette Coleman vibe where it's like...
They're both considered,
it's
like...
so bizarre that it's like kind of like...
free.
Yeah. It's like so bizarre at times that like it's almost... It can be off-putting, but...
Sure.
It's the more you listen to it, the more you kind of realize what's going on and just how unique and cool it was for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like albums I like albums, yeah.
No, I just thought of something funny. Go ahead.
I like albums in this there's nothing else like it kind of tone.
Sure.
And I feel like for jazz, this has to be one of the more, for lack of a better word, unique, I guess,
sure.
albums.
I just remembered, I don't remember if it was Eric Delphi or Ornette Coleman,
mm-hmm.
but I read a story about one of them went on stage and like did their performance.
Yeah.
And everyone was so angry because they did like an avant-garde set.
Uh-huh.
They got off stage and someone just went up and beat them up.
That sounds.
I don't remember which one it was though.
It probably was Coleman.
I think it was Ornette
Coleman is more jarring, I would say, than.
I would disagree.
Really? Okay.
I feel like Coleman takes like conventional ideas and takes them in a weird direction.
Okay.
Whereas this album in particular takes weird ideas and takes them in a weirder direction.
I feel like Coleman, which this album didn't, had kind of that migraine effect where I'm like, okay, you're trying way too hard.
Interesting.
At certain points.
There is one point in this album where I'm like, it's a little bit too much for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's on the title track, but I can't remember.
This definitely has the like feeling of an album that like any day could just all of a sudden become my favorite too.
Sure.
Because it is so out there and like interesting that like maybe one day I'll understand.
Was that a pun? Because there's an album called Out There.
I have not, actually.
Okay.
I have not heard any other Eric Dolphy albums. I probably should.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, I will eventually, I'm sure.
Need to hear more jazz. Everyone needs to hear more jazz.
We would love recommendations on jazz albums to listen to.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We should do an all jazz week.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll
talk about jazz one day.
Go ahead with your last one. I don't know what you
got. Okay, and the exact opposite field, we have like kind of electronic music, which we haven't touched on much, but electronic music, especially as of late, has been a pretty important genre to me. So probably because I feel like you can do so much with so little.
I agree.
And I wouldn't say this album's super electronic, but it's a lot of things at once, which has kind of been a theme for the albums I've chose. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because I feel like it's an album that you're just better off listening to for yourself and kind of...
I don't even know which one you're talking about.
Oh, Sweet Trip.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were doing that one. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I want to... It's not my top 5 favorite albums, I wouldn't say, but
sure.
I think this is an album that...
Because I wouldn't want to talk about 5 Can albums in one episode.
Yeah, probably not. I wouldn't want to just talk about Can for 20 hours, but I think this album needs to be talked about more in a lot of ways. Because
it is very, like, I feel like it's very underground still for being, like,
yeah, even
as big
for
of an impact as it probably has made.
And there is, I keep saying this, but there's just no other album that sounds like this album that I've found at this point. It kind of does the same thing as like Unwound and like Mars Volta or whatever, where it's like a lot of genres kind of flooding in at once. I think this one does it even more so. I'm not a huge dream pop guy, like at all, but there's a bunch of dream pop influence all over here, especially with the vocals. There's a ton of IDM throughout the whole thing, which is the worst genre name ever. There's tons of shoegaze too. There's a lot of just sections that come in and out that are just super My Bloody Valentine, but more harsh, which I like a lot, and like glitch hop and all those other sounds. It's definitely the happiest album that we've talked about today, I would say. It's an album.
It is an album.
It is an album that is just fun to listen to, and
I would definitely say that it's another one I enjoyed and I haven't returned to that much, but the more I have returned to it, the more I'm like, I don't know why I didn't like this more in the first place.
There's a lot of different kind of styles. Like, there's like a lot of songs that sound like this and a lot of songs that sound like this, I guess.
Sure.
I always was like, I wasn't initially super into like the more IDM stuff because I never initially was that into like Aphex Twin or anything like that. But like, especially now, like the first song is like probably the craziest IDM song I've ever heard, honestly. And then right up with that, there's the disco, which is like the happiest and catchiest song on earth. And there's a lot of songs like that towards the end where it's just like they're just basically shoegaze songs, but with IDM in them, and it's just really cool. I like I said, I didn't want to spend a ton of time talking about this because
you kind of have to just experience it.
Yeah, it's just something you have to listen to. But if you can stomach electronic music, honestly, just listen to it. Like
that's fair.
I don't think it's fairly accessible.
I would say there's at least like 5 songs that are just absolute like earworms.
Yeah. Like, I guarantee
so catchy.
If you like electronic music, there's definitely going to be like a couple things you take away from this album.
For sure.
And it's just very underrated. Needs more love. Need more Sweet Trip love.
I'm going to build up a lot of anticipation here.
Okay.
And then everyone's going to be like, what?
I can't remember what's left for you. But
we have very different opinions on this album.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. This album sucks. Yeah. Whatever album it is.
This is the best album ever. No. Just a very, very, very unique experience when I listened to this album. Mm-hmm. And I remember we kind of do this thing where we'll listen to like a handful of albums like together, and then we'll come back and be like, how did you feel about it? And kind of explain our thoughts. And I was like, I want to find like early post-hardcore, and I stumbled across this album, and I was like,
oh yeah.
I was like,
that different.
This is amazing. And then since then, I've just listened to it nonstop, and that's
Polvo.
Yeah.
Beat you to it.
Polvo with Today's Active Lifestyles.
This is very, very cool album. I don't know why you said we had different opinions on this.
Because I think it's incredible, and you think it's
awesome,
very great.
I do think that there's a bit of a ceiling on this album that I don't think you see on it. Sure. So I'll let you kind of talk for a bit. Okay. And I'll kind of chime in a minute.
This is so hard for me to explain because it's really not like anything else I've heard. It is similar though in like the Eric Dolphy kind of thing. It's like weird, crazy stuff happens, but it's grounded by like one thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the really weird stuff is just the guitar, like all of the guitar. There's at least 3 guitars on this album, like at any given point.
Or it sounds like it at least.
Well, there's 3 different guitar sections, I should say.
Yeah.
Like rhythm, lead, bass, and then there might be like.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Bass, yeah.
Well, I guess the thing that like mostly impresses me is that like the guitar will do this thing where all 3 guitars will be completely different. But somehow, like, they'll kind of intertwine into, like, just this wall of really quirky, like, textures and things. Mm-hmm. And what'll happen is, like, one guitar will do something really weird, and then the other one will do something really catchy and melodic. And, like, as the song goes on, they'll kind of switch, and, like, one will become dominant, and the other one will become kind of go into, like, you know, the background. Mm-hmm. Or, like, they'll both kind of do something kind of, like, quirky, and then the bass will be really loud and catchy. And I don't love, like, guitar-centered albums, but it does it so well because there are so many riffs that are, like, I would describe as, like, ugly. Like, they sound kind of terrible.
Yeah.
But they contrast in such a way with, like, either the vocals or the other guitars that, like, the ugly parts are never, like, the dominant part. I really can't explain it. It's almost like watching a movie you really love, and it's really dramatic, and there's just one really well-timed joke.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like the quirky parts are, like, borderline hilarious.
I think the guitar, you were saying you're not super into guitar albums. I feel like the guitar on this album has a lot of rhythm qualities.
That's another thing I would definitely say, too. I think it's a good point.
That.
Yeah.
It is a super catchy album, too. Like,
that's my big thing, is, like, it's so weird, but it's clearly the melody and the memorability, I don't know if that's a word, are, like, clearly front and center here. But there are, like, of the first 6 tracks, I would consider, like, 4 of them to be 10 out of 10 songs.
Yeah, not to talk about Can again, but it does have this similar, like, thing going for them where they have some of the catchiest things going on with some of the weirdest and more, like, forward-thinking things going on.
It clearly doesn't experiment, like, as much instrumentally.
Yeah.
Most of the like, exploration and, like, weird ideas that they kind of will jump into are almost all completely guitar-centered. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of, like, sections. That's another thing is, like, most of the songs on this album will kind of like jump between like 5 or 6 different sections at a time, but it's so flawless.
Right.
You are a lot more experienced with guitar, so I
Yeah.
don't really know.
No, I think the guitar is really awesome on this album. I don't have many complaints on it. I would say the one thing that kind of holds this album a little bit back for me is it kind of has like that everything's so weird, but a lot of the weirdness kind of like
Wears off.
blends together to me a little
okay,
bit.
interesting.
Sort of. I kind of wish they had a little bit more of variance in what they were doing. It's like, for me, that band is like, I have to be in a mood for them, I guess. Like, such a mood. Like,
Sure.
I mean, they itch that itch pretty well. But
Right.
I think that they kind of are a little one note, is I guess what I was trying to say.
Okay, that's fair. Another thing is, like, I've heard some of the earlier stuff, and I get, like, a little bit of a Pavement and Modest Mouse feel.
Yeah, I could totally
which I
see that.
think they kind of were before both of those bands, though. I could be wrong.
What year were they?
Let's find out here.
I should mention I was a massive Modest Mouse fan at one point.
You like
in
Pavement
time.
a lot, too, though.
I do like Pavement, but I was super into Modest
Let's
Mouse.
say this album was 93. Let's see.
I think they were around then.
Yeah, this album came out in 93, but when...
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
Wasn't Lonesome... Was
Well,
Lonesome
that's not
Crowded
their
West
first
was...
album.
I mean, sorry, Long Drive was 94?
Yeah, it actually might have been later, so that's interesting.
And then I don't know when Pavement kind of got started.
I think they were more mid-90s, too.
Okay, so that's
they
interesting.
They might be before. Maybe they were the ones listening to Polvo.
So I don't know, but whereas I feel like with today's active lifestyles, those are just almost gone entirely. Like, I think you can make the argument, you kind of mentioned, like, the weird twangy guitar
Yeah.
in a lot of spots that Isaac Brock likes to do.
Yeah.
And I think the vocal delivery is similar to Pavement,
A little
but
bit, yeah.
the one thing that I think this does that Pavement doesn't do is that I think that the contrast between the really weird guitars and the really melodic vocals is so, like, impactful, I guess would be the word. This is not an album I'd recommend to like that many people because
No.
it's subtle, but it's enough to be like, I could see it being off-putting for someone. And it was funny because I was listening to this album one time in the car because my dad used to play guitar, and I was like, oh, he'll like a quirky guitar album. And then like we're driving, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, Polvo, and he's like, this guitarist sucks. I was like, oh, I thought you'd like it. Sorry.
He almost does feel like a guitar player who like just completely abandons the idea of like, I'm gonna play in this time signature, or I'm gonna play
this specific key or something.
He just kind of he's like an all feel guitar player.
Sure.
But what the feel he's going for is so left field that everything comes off so like jarring.
And I think it would be different if like it were really grounded and then one guitarist did something weird. Mm-hmm. But like at any given time, one of the guitarists will do something really weird, and then the other ones will be grounded, and maybe like the bass is doing something weird and the other two are grounded. Yeah, I don't know. I just, every time I hear this album, I get like, it's both catchy and like you can like headbang to it. I can't like, especially like Thermal Treasure is such a jam.
I do, not to jerk my own ween right here, but I do see a lot of similarities in certain songs with the way he writes guitar and with the way I write guitar too, which is really cool. And I don't hear it a lot, but
I definitely
unique and cool.
No, I totally agree. Actually, there are a lot of things that I think it's totally not intentional because this is the only album we've heard of them.
Yeah,
and yeah, I guess I don't know, maybe just similar thinking, parallel thinking. But I just really love this album. I don't think I'd recommend it that many people, but if you're like, this is considered early math rock too. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I could. Totally
it's like math rock and post-hardcore.
Yeah,
I would say indie probably too, to a certain degree.
But it doesn't sound like
any of the three.
It does not sound like This Town Needs Guns or anything like that,
right?
Like, whatsoever.
I agree.
Where that kind of music is kind of like, oh, we're doing something really weird that kind of makes you like happy, and it's like, oh, this is really catchy.
Right.
Polvo just like, I'm gonna do this really abrasive weird thing, and
like strap in.
Maybe you'll like it. Who knows?
Right.
If you're Josh, you'll really like it.
Yeah. So everyone named Josh, go listen to that album.
All right. So
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
I kind of did want to wrap it up by having a short section where we kind of discuss other albums that we
both love. We do listen to more than just rock. So,
yeah. So
go ahead if you want.
So what are your other favorite rock albums, Josh?
I wanted to talk about Mad Villainy, but I feel like that's been done to death. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have kind of like dissected that one.
Yeah, in the vein of hip hop, Mad Villainy is probably like one of my favorite albums, and probably yours as well.
Yeah.
I really like Mr. Little Ugly Mane, but I don't think he has an album where I'd be like, oh, that's my favorite hip hop album. But he there was a time where he was releasing singles right before, quote unquote, the death, I guess, of that name, and those singles are like some of my favorite hip hop songs, period. Which are, I think it's Prelude and Uneven Compromise, I believe is what it's called. I really recommend checking those tracks out, especially if you can stomach kind of hard to listen to dark hip hop. What else would be up there? I mean,
I would put Triple X up there too.
Triple X, yeah,
one of my all-time favorite hip hop albums.
I love pretty much everything Kanye does. So,
yeah,
but you know that.
Yeah, we talked about him a lot. I also would put Coma's First Utterance up there.
Ooh, I'm kind of bummed that didn't make the list.
Maybe we'll have to do that a different
we'll have to talk.
Same thing with. I was going to also mention Disco Volante.
Yeah, Mr. Bungle's great.
So good. But I feel like I could dig into that one a lot more, just because it's so strange and so many sections and so many songs that album just really hits about every possible like subgenre. I feel like, it's really varied.
For as much rock as we talked about, we didn't have like any metal, I don't think, in here
That's true.
Today. I was very, very close with either putting in Dope Throne or Boris Pink, which are both really awesome stoner metal, stoner rock kind of albums that are not similar at all, but you should definitely look up both those albums because they're both pretty phenomenal. IMO.
I was also going to mention
Pig Destroyer 2.
Oh yeah, that would be an interesting. Yeah, that's one you could definitely talk about.
Prowler in the Yard's probably my peak Pig Destroyer. I don't know if that's what yours is.
I really want to hear Book Burner. I haven't heard that yet.
It's not better than Prowler, but it's really good.
Okay, that's fair.
It's not better than a Terrifier either. It's Terrifier or Prowler the best two, I think.
I was also going to mention Tangerine Dream.
Yeah,
because they're one of my favorite bands. And I wish it's one I would definitely talk about, but I don't know what I would say because it's kind of like if you've heard one thing by them, it's like you know what you're listening for,
right?
I guess. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say
Geez.
we haven't. We're both massive Frank Zappa fans too.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of Zappa.
We have very different like top tens though.
Yeah.
So that would
have
be.
To talk about
we do an all Zappa.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool, actually.
I'm a big fan of Shoo Shoo a Promise.
I forgot about. Yeah, I definitely would have talked about that.
There's some other rock albums I should mention, or slowcore, quote unquote. I'm very into Duster. Oh, I should. And this isn't rock at all, but for hip hop, Death Grips Ex-Military.
Yes,
is very up there for me.
I also feel like I don't know. Death Grips has been kind of been talked about to death.
Yeah, totally.
So that's why I think that's kind of what
they're
we both...
a boring subject at this point, but
yeah,
Ex-Military for some reason does not get talked about nearly as much as like their other huge albums, but I think it's definitely their best and most impactful, at least on me.
Nick Drake, we probably could
Nick Drake's great.
Fishman's
is awesome.
Kind of fascinating.
Yeah,
that's another one I think we have like fairly differing opinions on.
We could just.
I thought of another one that would have been cool.
Huh?
Herbie Hancock.
Yeah,
because we both really love that.
Oh yeah, there's other jazz albums we could have talked about, like The Love Supreme.
Yes, we could have talked about that.
Oh yeah, I should also mention Swan Soundtracks for the Blind was at a time probably my favorite album, but
I'm fascinated by that album.
It's very. I think it's probably the best. I've heard about half their discography at this point. I'd say it's definitely their best album, but it's also by far their longest and most hard to
digest,
listen to. Yeah, and it would
also Noy or Faust we could have done.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Faust 4 especially.
Yeah, I think that's
Jane Doe also.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to
Fantastic Planet Failure.
Okay.
Grouper.
Oh yeah, we probably should have talked about Grouper. We're just kind of listing bands we like and artists at this
Velvet
point.
Underground, Woman, The Microphones.
Yeah.
One Tricks Point Never for me.
Yeah. But I think in the future we'll definitely dig into more of these sorts of things, and if you guys have like a specific
Charles
episode.
Mingus.
Thank you. Episode that you'd like to hear, or like album reviewed, or artist kind of talked about, or anything, that would be cool because we could do that for you because we love you.
Red House Painters.
Okay, thanks, guys.